Let's turn our attention now to what's happening in Iran. And explosions were reported across parts of southern Iran overnight, but Washington hasn't confirmed whether it launched a third night of strikes. Earlier this week, America and Iran traded fire after Trump said that the ceasefire between the two countries was over. Trump ordered airstrikes on Iran's railways and disrupted the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's funeral, and Tehran retaliated by firing missiles at American bases in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. Amid the spiralling tensions, the status of negotiations remain unclear, although Trump told reporters that Tehran's leaders called and wanted a deal so badly. Let's now speak with Alan Eyre. Alan is a former US senior diplomat. He was part of the Obama administration's negotiating team for the Iran nuclear deal, and he's now a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. Alan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What's your assessment of where things are now in terms of Iran and America? And is there any chance that we can get another ceasefire on the table?
Well, I think there's a chance the ceasefire will be renewed, but the problem is this. The U.S. pushed through an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that had a lot of ambiguity, and some of that ambiguity had to do with the status of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran thinks it is existentially important to maintain control of the strait. The U.S. doesn't want that to happen. And so when the U.S. tried to fire on ships that were not proceeding as it wished to in terms of passage through the strait, the U.S. tried to defend those ships and attacked Iran, and we got caught in this escalatory cycle. It will back down, but I don't see any way that either side is going to move in terms of what it wants to happen for the Strait of Hormuz.
And look, in terms of the language being used as well, it feels like the ante has been upped. Trump has called the Iranians scum. I mean, the Iranians no doubt will be sort of hitting back. I mean, with the temperature going up like this, that all makes it much more difficult for the negotiators, does it not?
Well, certainly one of the hallmarks of the U.S. administration during this whole war has been messaging inconsistency. One day the Iranian leaders are, per Trump, rational people, better than the previous ones. The next day they're the scum of the earth, they're crazy. At this point, the Iranians aren't paying any attention to what President Trump says publicly, or to a lesser extent, what his negotiators are saying behind the room. They're judging on action. What they've got is a theory of negotiation called commitment for commitment, which is if the U.S. takes a step, we'll take a step. But they're going to be cautious because certain steps, like, for example, the U.S. waiving sanctions on Iran oil exports, are reversible. And the Iranians are seeing that happen right now as the U.S. has canceled waivers on sanctions for Iranian oil exports.
And if this war, resumes for a long period of time, and the ceasefire is well and truly over, what's that going to do for oil prices and the economic consequences?
That's the million-dollar question, because that's the single most important strategic reality here. Let's not forget, Iran's nuclear program was not an imminent threat, and that was the putative cause for this war. But every day that the Strait of Hormuz remains not necessarily fully closed, but even restricted, you're getting more and more of a strain on the global economy. The United States is about 18 million barrels away from hitting the functional bottom of its strategic petroleum reserves, and it's not just the United States. So the key, it's like your blood flow in your body. The key is getting the flow of maritime traffic through the strait back up as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And that's not going to happen if there are hostilities.
All right. Well, look, Alan, good to speak with you. Thanks very much for your time. That's Alan Eyre, former senior US diplomat.
Now, the war between the US and Iran appears to be close to resuming in full after President Trump ordered airstrikes on Iran's railways, disrupting Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's burial. The Iranians retaliated by firing ballistic missiles at an American airbase in Jordan. The Times World Affairs editor Catherine Philp was in Iran to cover the funeral of the Ayatollah. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning, Callum.
There have been reports of explosions overnight in several locations, although there's conflicting reports about whether this was a third round of US attacks or not. A US official said the military hadn't launched any new strikes. Is it clear where we're at this morning?
I think it's clear that we've been seeing an escalating pattern of retaliation over the last few days. I left Tehran on Wednesday after the first strikes had just begun, and that was the day after Iran had attacked these tankers in the Straits of Hormuz, which is really what's kicked this all off again. And I mean, we weren't sure if we were going to actually be able to get out of the country, whether airspace would be open in those circumstances. So the question is really, does this constitute a wholesale breakdown of the ceasefire? It's starting to look like it. The longer this goes on and the number of days, because I think that essentially the memorandum of understanding that was meant to lead to a settlement is really a memorandum of misunderstanding, and that both sides meant different things by it. And now we are seeing some of the poorly worded clauses fall apart, and the differing intentions of each side behind them coming out. And that is translating into, what looks like a resumption of hostilities.
Yeah. I wonder if there was a sense while you were in Tehran as to how ordinary people felt about the prospect of conflict resuming in full. I know these things are often hard to gauge, but one of the perceptions of people in Iran might be that they really dislike the United States, and so any attack against the United States is celebrated. On the other hand, I'm sure there are plenty of people who simply want this thing to be over so they can just carry on as normal, whatever normal may mean in that particular context.
I would say that is the majority view. I would also say that you bear in mind I was there to cover Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral, and so really most of what was going on around me was not representative of the entire Iranian population. Most of the people I was around were our regime supporters or ultra religious or possibly conservative. I mean, I did come across a couple of people who said that their memory of or idea of Khamenei had evolved since he died, and that's worrying if he's going to become, a kind of figurehead for resistance. But no, I would say the majority of Iranians desperately want the war to stop, are not pro their regime, and in different measures. I mean, I think it's estimated it's about 20% of the population maximum are really behind the regime. There's a similar number, probably larger, who are very actively against it, and then you have a lot of people in the middle who just want to get on with their lives. So I think, the majority of people, they do not need this.
Yeah. And where are the mediators in all of this, Catherine? Pakistan, Qatar, who have been sort of channeling channels for diplomacy between Washington and Tehran over these last few months. Where are they at this point?
They're sort of really not in the picture yet because things are still at this kinetic level. I mean, I think there's some scrambling. There was meant to be, certainly Pakistan has not re-entered the process again. Qatar was meant to be hosting talks almost immediately after the whole funeral proceedings ended, because of course this was meant to kind of put everything from negotiations to hostilities into abeyance for the length of the funeral period. So that was meant to restart in Qatar. As far as I know, Qatar is still trying to get the parties together. But I mean, we've heard from Donald Trump, it just doesn't sound like he believes the Iranians are ready to talk. And to be honest, the rhetoric coming out of Iranian officials while I was in Tehran did not suggest that either. There was, we had a meeting with the foreign ministry spokesman who was laying it on pretty heavy that, it'd be very difficult to resume negotiations after what the Americans have done. And of course, he's talking about what the Americans did 4 months ago, which was, or the Americans and the Israelis together, which was assassinate the supreme leader. But that kind of outrage, as it were, of assassinating a leader had to be renewed and whipped up again 4 months after it happened in order for the funeral to take place. So there was a lot of that kind of talk of, negotiations, no compromise. We want revenge on the US. It'd gone up a notch again in that mourning period. The rhetoric.
Yeah. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for speaking to us this morning. That's the Times World Affairs editor, Catherine Philp, who up until a couple of days ago was in Tehran.